If you've ever been in a relationship with a depressed woman, this phrase might sound familiar. She's not like that. It's the depression talking. And that's exactly where many people get lost. Yes, depression is a serious illness, studied for decades, with a real impact on mood, behavior, and relationships. But that doesn't mean that everything that happens within a relationship, whether innocent, unconscious, or without consequence, is fine. Today, I want to talk to you as a friend, without judgment, without exaggerated labels, about something that almost no one talks about clearly: the mental games and emotional tactics that can arise when a depressed woman is in a relationship, often without realizing it, and other times, realizing it more than they admit. Let's get to the facts. The literature in psychology shows that depression affects more than just mood. It changes perception of reality, interpretation of intentions, emotional regulation, and most importantly, attachment dynamics. Studies published in journals such as Journal of Affective Disorders and Clinical Psychology Review show that depressed people tend to interpreting neutrality as rejection, confusing boundaries with abandonment, seeking constant validation, and developing patterns of emotional dependency. So far, no villain has emerged. The problem begins when this enters an intimate relationship, because without realizing it, the relationship ceases to be a partnership and turns into emotional regulation system. You stop being her boyfriend. You become an anchor, an informal therapist, an emotional savior. And it's in this context that the psychological tactics, not in the classic Machiavellian sense, but as unconscious strategies for emotional survival. Science calls this dysfunctional relational coping. In practice, this is when a person, in order to alleviate their own internal pain, begins to induce guilt, manipulating through suffering, using silence as punishment, alternating victimhood with accountability, creating a constant feeling of emotional debt. And here is the most important point. These dynamics don't arise because she is bad. They arise because chronic emotional pain changes the way a person relates to the world. But the effect on those on the other side is devastating. Research on partners of people with depression show higher rates of anxiety, emotional exhaustion, decreased self-esteem, and a constant feeling of failing. In other words, while you are trying to save her, he is losing himself. And perhaps you've already felt this, even without being able to name it. That feeling of walking on eggshells, the fear of saying no, the guilt of wanting to leave, the constant question, is the problem me? Now that you understand the scenario, let's get into what actually happens in practice within the relationship. Again, this isn't about accusing anyone, it's about seeing patterns. 1. Guilt as an emotional tool. One of the most common and most studied tactics is inducing guilt. Research on depression and relationships shows that depressed people tend to externalize their emotional pain when they feel insecure, and the quickest way to relieve this pain is to make the other person feel responsible for her. Phrases like, "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't do this. You know how I feel when you leave. I only feel this way because of you," are not necessarily planned, but they work. You start to giving more than you would like to, letting go of limits, feeling guilty about basic needs, and without realizing it, the relationship becomes a field where your well-being always comes after hers. 2. Chronic victimization and role reversal. Another well-documented pattern is the constant victimization. Studies in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, they show that in depressive states, there's a tendency to interpret conflicts always as proof of rejection or a personal attack. Result? Any attempted dialogue on your part turns into aggression. You say, "That hurt me." She listens, "You're attacking me." And then the reversal happens. You become the one to blame. She becomes the victim, and the original problem disappears. In the end, you're the one who should apologize, even when he did nothing wrong. 3. Punitive silence and emotional withdrawal. Silence is also a powerful form of emotional control. Literature calls this withdrawal coping, withdrawal as an emotional regulation strategy. In practice, she disappears, becomes cold, cut off emotional contact, and you go into a state of alert. What did I do? How do I fix this? I need to talk to her now. Silence is not used for reflection, it is used to generate anxiety. And when you finally get close, she returns fragile, sad, and hurt. The cycle is complete. 4. Alternating between fragility and resilience. This is one of the most confusing games. In one day, she is fragile, dependent, needs you for everything. On the other hand, free, critical, demanding. Studies on anxious attachment show that this oscillation creates traumatic ties, trauma bonding. Your brain begins to associate pain, effort, relief, hope, and it's addictive. You don't stay because you were doing well, you stay because you hope to get well again. 5. The implicit idea of, if you leave, something bad might happen. This is the most dangerous one. It doesn't need to be said directly, it only needs to be suggested. Phrases like, "You are the only thing that keeps me standing," "Without you, I don't know what I would do," "My life only makes sense with you." According to studies on emotional dependency, this creates extreme psychological responsibility. You're no longer in a relationship, it's an invisible emotional contract, and leaving seems cruel, even when staying is destroying you. All of this happens while you're thinking, she needs help. Yes, she needs it, but not by sacrificing yourself emotionally. After all this, you might be wondering, so every depressed person is manipulative? No, and that's an important question. Psychology is clear on one point. Depression explains behaviors, but does not automatically justify them. A depressed person can suffer deeply and at the same time cause real suffering to those around them. The two things can coexist. The most common mistake people make in this type of relationship is confusing empathy with self-abandonment. You start wanting to help and ends up canceling yourself. Science calls this over-functioning relational role, when a partner takes on emotional roles that are not their own, regulating mood, avoiding crises, preventing breakdowns, providing psychological support to the other, and that doesn't cure anyone. Only two get sick. An essential point that clinical literature reinforces is this: when suffering becomes a relational tool, the relationship ceases to be healthy, regardless of the intention. It doesn't matter whether she does it consciously or not, the impact on you continues to exist. Therefore, the watershed moment is not asking, does she do this because she wants to? It's asking, is this destroying me? Healthy empathy has its limits. Love doesn't require you to accept constant guilt, fear of leaving, or responsibility for another person's emotional stability. And here's something that few people say clearly. You are not anyone's treatment.